Hey everybody, Steve Burns back again. So, we have learned how to render our files into a video format. So, if you go to your Output tab, which is the third icon down on our right side vertical menu, you've learned that you can set your output folder. You have already learned that you can come over to the file format and choose your format. So far, you've been choosing JPEG or AVI. Now I'm going to teach you how to render out things the professional way. So if you're working in a studio, whether it's a gaming studio or a film studio, we do not render files utilizing standard video formats. Why? Because if your computer crashes or if something happens, you have to re-render the entire video file over again. So what's done in the industry is we render out sequence files. And those sequence files are individual JPEGs or MPGs or TIFF files, each one representing a particular frame. So in the Output tab here, we go down right below the format, you see your little output option. We're going to check the folder we're going to output to. So as you can see, I'm going to select this folder called Output 3. I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to go up into my main sequence files folder. I will right click and I am going to make a new folder. And I'm going to call this folder Tower 4, representing the fourth iteration of renders I'm going to do for you. So for this particular project. So I've been experimenting a little bit. So I'm going to double click on the folder. On the bottom right, accept the folder. Okay, we're good to go. Now, to render faster, I set my percentage down to 25%, but I think I'll go 50% just to render, just to get a little better quality. Okay. So once that's set, and for what you're going to render is probably a full, now not a full frame, but I will accept 50%. If your machine is super slow and is having a hard time handling, rendering the full files, right up here under the format, you can tell it to be 50% of the 1920 by 1080 format. So I will accept that. All right, now my start frame is number 1. My end frame is 150. I want to make sure that's set. Okay, which matches my start and end frame in Blender here. So if I come down to the bottom and let's scroll it so I can see all my numbers. There we go. And pulling it over a little bit. There we go. So start frame from 0 to 150. So now that that's set, I already have my folder set. We're going to go to the file format. And the format you're pretty much almost always going to use is PNG. So PNG. Okay, so select that. Now, you can use no compression rate, which is fine. I mean, 15%. The default's 15%, and that's fine. I'm going to go down something a little lower so that there's no compression rate. So 0 compression rate. And then we can overwrite files if we choose to. We don't need to worry about that because this is a fresh folder. Made a brand new folder for this. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save out the files. So as you can see, this is a standard view or standard shading view of my meteor flying through the air and then crashing into the building. And when it's crashed the building, actually let's look at this in render view. So let's go to my option here and go to render and get a good idea as to what this is going to look like as it renders out. There we go. So we're flying through the air, we're hitting the building is exploding into millions of particles or shrapnel. Shrapnel's falling to the ground and a meteor goes off into the distance. So we're going to animate this sequence. Okay, so let's do so now. The way we're going to accomplish that is simply, I'm going to stop the animation and if you render out a single frame, it's F12 on the keyboard. If you want to render out the sequence files or the animation, it's Control F12. And here we go. So it's starting to render. We look right up here. This is frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4. So it's rendering each individual frames at 50% of the 1920 by 1080. So now the system is rendering frame by frame, as you can see. And take note, I added a little bit of motion blur. So motion blur gives you a real nice sense of movement. And motion blur is often found under the rendering tab here. So if you go to your rendering tab, come right down here. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 8th one down, motion blur. And I select it. And you can play around with these options here for your shutter. Depending on where the percentage or the position of your shutter or percentage of your shutter, it's going to determine how much drag or how much blur to actually apply. You can go to a max blur, play around with this, just experiment with this and see what you actually get. Okay, so when we're done, we're going to go take a look at the actual renders on the file. The render is now complete. Let's go take a look at our sequence files. Here we are in the sequence files folder, the file folder, Tower 2, number 3. Here are the actual files. Let's actually bring this on over. And what we can see are the individual frames, frames 1 all the way through. Let's go down toward the bottom. All the way through frame 150. There we go. So we can see the meteor coming through the sky. That's our HDRI sky in the background. Let's go to the top. This is our HDR sky in the background. And it hits the building. The building tears up into shrapnels and highlights a little bit of a bright energy as the meteor collides with it. Shrapnels everywhere. And then the meteor spins off into the distance in the very end. So has a little bit of a story to it. Okay. All right. So what you've just learned how to do is how to save out sequence files. So let's now go and learn how to re-import those files in to save it out as a video format of your choice.